Hello and welcome to Safe Haven Sanctuary. My name is Samantha and I will be your host today. So on Safe Haven Sanctuary, we discuss things, all self-love, all self-worth, self-growth, self-improvement, and all things around relationships, not just with others, but also with yourself. And today's topic, I actually wanted to explore the topic around guilt. Now, this is something that shows up in all of my clients' lives and for myself as well. Guilt often comes from when we are doing something that we are told that we're not supposed to do, or that has been programmed into us that we're not supposed to do. For example, we're supposed to be polite to people all the time, even if they're rude to us. And as women, we have been programmed to think this way and to act this way, to the point where our boundaries are pushed so much that we're being taken advantage of, right? So this is just an example of what we're programmed to think that we have to do in order to be accepted, in order to be loved in society, in our families. Now, if we don't do these certain things, then we're deemed either bad or ungrateful or impolite. And well, to be honest, that's just not all true, right? If there's something that you don't want to do, you shouldn't have to do it. You're a human being and you have free will, and you shouldn't have to do anything that you don't want to do, right? And so that is why I wanted to talk about the topic of guilt. Guilt often comes from a deep-rooted childhood wound where we are expected to people please. Okay, so it often starts with our family, where I know for myself, I'm deemed as the nice little girl who did everything and who abided by all the rules and was just this good girl. And not even that, the good girl stereotype really shows up for me in my life. And recently I've just been challenging that a lot because yes, I'm a good person, there's a lot of things that I don't want to do that I'm expected to do. And it's not bad if I don't do them, right? And so anyway, let's just dissect guilt and why it shows up in our life. It shows up from that people-pleasing standpoint, right? So guilt comes from that people-pleasing, maybe childhood wound. Okay, or it could be something that developed later on in life, maybe from a relationship where you didn't feel worthy enough, so you just kept giving and giving, and when you didn't, maybe your partner had said something along the lines of that maybe you're not good enough, or maybe that feeling of not being good enough showed up for you, whether it's from your partner or from old childhood wounds, right? And so how to work through that feeling of guilt, okay, is by putting yourself first. Putting yourself first, it just sounds like such an easy thing to do. And over the last 2 years, I've really been dedicated to just investing in myself, putting myself first. And it's upset a lot of people. And I've had to deal with this subject of guilt as well. And along with that, I've had to deal with a lot of grief because I've lost a lot of people along the way. And to be honest with you, I'm actually quite grateful for the loss of those people and situations because it's clearing my pathway for a more aligned life that I want to live. I don't want to be in that people-pleasing mode anymore. I know before I used to have zero boundaries. People would ask me to do something and I would just be like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Oh yeah, sure, I'll come to that party and I'll come to that party and also come to that party. And I would be sitting there in so much anxiety, feeling like, oh my God, how the F am I going to make it to all these parties? And I don't even want to go to any of them, right? And, it's just, there comes a point in your life where enough is enough, and you start to feel those symptoms of unwellness, whether it's mentally, and usually when there's that mental unwellness, it shows up physically as well. And that's what started to happen for me, is that I was just being drained of all my emotions, being drained of my energy. And it's not the fault of anybody else, but it's honestly the fault of myself, where, and I mean this in a respectful way to myself, where I take accountability for taking on too much, for wanting to please other people, for not wanting to hurt other people's feelings. And I think with me just saying yes to everything, I was pushing myself aside. And that way I would avoid that feeling of that guilt. But now, that guilt does show up, even when I still have to say no. But I have to give myself a really hard reminder of, okay, why are we doing this? We're doing this for our wellness. Okay, if the people who love you want you to be well, are they going to be upset with you? Are they going to make you feel guilty? Well, no. And if they do, then that's not your responsibility to take on their emotions. Everyone is responsible for their emotions, and I'm responsible for mine. So even when those feelings of guilt do show up, I have to do a lot of self-talk to get through it. Okay, because obviously, I mean, we never want to hurt people, we never want to disappoint people, but there's going to be times where, and there may be multiple times in your life, where you have to say no, and it's for your own good, and only you know what's for your own good. Before I used to think that people knew what was best for me, my parents, my family, my friends, and I wouldn't even take a moment to just sit with myself and think about, like, what is it that I need? Like, what is it that feels right for me? I would just sort of pick up the phone and say, okay, like, what do you think about this? And then go based off of that, or to validate the decision that I'm making. And so again, like, that is where guilt came in, because I was not feeling confident in myself to make those specific decisions, whether it came down to like choosing an outfit or to making a big life decision, right? And for example, leaving for Mexico. For those of you who don't know me, in 2020, I had left Mexico. Not Mexico. I left Canada. I grew up in Canada. I left Canada to start this whole new life in Mexico. I wasn't happy with what was happening with the pandemic. And I've always just really wanted to build a life overseas and work overseas. And so I decided to take that leap, and I didn't tell anybody. I was applying to jobs, and I got a lot of jobs actually. And the one that I chose was a school teacher in Mexico. And I accepted the job, and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my family. A lot of that came from fear that they would try and talk me out of it. And then, I didn't really tell any friends either. And I also didn't share it because I wanted to just enjoy the juiciness of it. Like, oh, like, I got a job in a foreign country, and like they're paying for my work visa, they're paying for my accommodations, and like everything was good and working out, and I was just like really feeling myself. And I wanted to bask in that for as long as I could. I wanted to bask in it for as long as I could. And I did. And then something extremely traumatic happened to me in 2020. And well, I wasn't able to sort of cherish that anymore, or hide it, I should say. I think I was hiding it a little bit. Because circumstances came up, and I ended up just telling everybody, like, you know what, like, I'm out of here. I'm going to Mexico to start a new life, and I have a job lined up, and that's just what I'm gonna do. And I needed to do that for myself because, you know, I was so caught up in pleasing everybody else, my parents, my other family members, even friends too. I remember, I was supposed to move to Australia prior to me moving to Mexico. And because of the pandemic, it ended up getting canceled. So I was pretty disappointed about that. And I was like, I need to get the F out of this country. And I need to just sort of, find my own independence and myself. Because when I was in Canada, I was living with my parents, and I'm so grateful to them. They've given me so much in my life, and supported me financially with just so many things, and I'll always be grateful to them for everything that they've done. But I was craving that and yearning that sense of independence, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to find it on my own in Canada, because I would always have people there to support me. And so that's why I made that leap to, well, initially supposed to be to Australia, but really, even in Australia, I was going to be living with my aunt, and I had family there. So Mexico was just like new place, don't know anybody. And yeah, like I took the leap, and it was the best thing that I have ever done in my whole life. Like right now, I live there. I live in Puerto Vallarta, and Puerto Vallarta is like, oh my gosh, it is my home. And if I hadn't made that decision on my own, I would have let other people talk me out of it, because Mexico gets a very bad reputation. And, rightfully so, like, people would have been concerned, and, I get where that comes from. But at the end of the day too, as long as you're careful and you're just taking care of your own things, and, you're associating with safe people, or getting to know people, it's okay. And I always say this to myself, is that, like, God is always with me. The universe is always guiding me, is always protecting me. Like, God's not gonna do me wrong. And if God does put me in certain situations, I make it out really, really just fine. In fact, it come out so much stronger. And so God had gifted me this opportunity to go to Mexico. And I felt extreme guilt. That's why I was hiding it from people. Because I knew what they were going to say based on past experiences of me talking about wanting to move overseas. And this time I said, no, like, you know what, I'm going to keep it to myself until it's necessary to tell them. And this time I'm not letting it stop me. I'm not letting anybody stop me. And I didn't, I got on that plane, and I left. I started this beautiful new life, and I've never looked back. Thinking about it, I get emotional, because if I had let that guilt guide me through my decision making, one, I wouldn't be where I am in my healing journey, and two, I wouldn't be in this divine place, not only with myself, but just in nature. Like, where I live near a beach. I live near water. I literally live in nature. I'm surrounded by trees and mountains and breeze and fresh air. And because I allowed my intuition to kick in, because I allowed trust within my heart, within God, within the universe, I was able to create this new opportunity. I was able to bring forward these parts of me that I've never met before. And they just became alive because I was able to navigate through my own decision making. And so now the journey didn't stop there of me just moving to Mexico. My guilt didn't just go out the door from this one experience. Hell no. Oh my gosh. So, after that, my goal was to work on boundary setting, with everybody, with myself included, because I did not have boundaries. I didn't have any boundaries with myself. And a lot of people think that, when we talk about boundaries, that we're only referring to boundaries with other people, but boundaries always come back with what we have to do for ourselves, because the boundaries within ourselves reflect our external world, right? And so this was just one of my steps, was, taking space away from my life in Canada and having a healthy new foundation to start off here in Mexico. And so, again, guilt did not just go out the door after. Once I was in a safe and healthy environment to start healing and to start setting boundaries, I really started to feel that guilt again, to start feel that guilt kicking in. Oh, I'm not talking to people as much. And, although I definitely stay in touch with people who also stay in touch with me, and people who I feel that are aligned with my values and who are accepting of the life that I have right now. It was hard, and it still is. I still experience guilt sometimes because, we don't want to hurt people. And oftentimes when we're setting boundaries for ourselves, people get hurt in the process. But one thing, though, we have to remind ourselves is that we're not responsible for how people feel when we set our boundaries. We have every right to set boundaries, and we should. Your wellness is the most important thing. It's the most important thing. You need to be well, not only for you, but if you're a mom and you have kids, you need to be well for yourself and for your kids. Okay, if you're a sister, you need to be well for your other sister. If you are a brother, you need to be well for your brother, for yourself, for your work, and that always starts from you. Okay. So, the reason and purpose for this video is I wanted to really bring about the realness around guilt and how this is an ongoing subject that we need to work through. Okay. If you are somebody who has, constantly been there for people and is you're that friend that everyone goes to for relationship advice, or just if they have a problem or they need to vent, right? Remember that not only are you going to take on those energetics of what other people are feeling, but there's going to be a point where you're tired, right? And that's okay that you're tired, because you weren't put on this earth one to solve everybody's problems, one to listen to everybody's problems. But you have boundaries yourself. You have limits yourself that is important for you to enforce. Okay, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a counselor and I help survivors of sexual violence. So the whole day I am listening to some pretty horrific things. Um, and it impacts me. I have to make sure that I take care of myself in between my sessions, that I'm breathing in between my sessions, that I'm eating, that I'm hydrating, that sometimes I have to journal in between sessions because there might be things that have come up for me while listening to my clients, or something may have felt heavy and I maybe need to debrief and talk about that. And I because I am that friend, that family member that people come to vent, to talk, and to pour their heart out to, and I love being that person. I truly, truly do. But there are times, a lot of times, where I have to say, you know what, like I'm taking a screen break, or if someone is, calling me and like really needing to talk, and I'm not in the headspace to provide them with the support that they need, because I need to support myself, right? And again, like that guilt sort of kicks in, like, oh my gosh, this person's gonna think I'm the worst person ever because they're sad and I'm telling them that I'm not okay to talk, right? But at the end of the day, we really need to be understanding of what our loved ones need. Okay, no matter what we're going through, if you are in a predicament where you're going through a hard time, please don't solely depend on your family and your friends to be that listening ear. It's not fair to them. Hire somebody, hire a life coach, hire a therapist. And get that, like it's important to have your friends and family too. I'm not saying don't talk to them at all about it, but when it gets to the point of where it's overbearing on one person or three people or two people, however many people you're sharing your story with, it's really important that you're checking in with them, and before you start, just saying, hey, like, are you in the right headspace to listen, and be prepared for them to say no, right? And reassure them too that it's okay if they're not okay to listen as well, right? And so, as I was saying, before, like, I had zero boundaries, where I'd be working my full day and then there's like 3 or 4 people on my personal waiting list waiting to talk to me after work. And it got to the point where, like, I was working and then I spent 3 hours on the phone with one person listening to them and what's happening for them. And then it was time to go to bed. I was so tired, and I really had to just take a look and like look inside and say, like, Sam, this one, you have to take care of yourself. Like, after work, you need to do things that make you happy, because you have a heavy job. And although you love your job, it's still heavy and it's not easy, right? And not even regardless of my job, like, for any of you who are listening who are not in the social work field or in the helping field, it's important that regardless of your work, that you're taking time for yourself and really working through releasing that guilt around doing that, because your wellness relies on it. Your wellness relies on it. And at first it's going to feel uncomfortable putting yourself first. At first it's going to feel like you are maliciously doing something bad to somebody if you say no. And really listen to the voices. Like, when you do try to put yourself first, I want you to listen to the voices that come up. I want you to listen to the thoughts that come up and ask yourself where that's coming from. Like, is that your voice, or is that a voice of a parent? Is that a voice of a sibling? Is that a voice of an employer? Like, why is that coming up for you? Because if you think about it, when we're born, we are born innately like self-absorbed in a good way. We have, think about when you're a child, you just say whatever the hell you want and you do whatever you want until your parents tell you no. But you have this different type of freedom, and then you start to get older and you start to get, you have these programs, you have these programming, and you start to be conditioned to do certain things and to not do certain things, right? Whether you like it or not. Right? And so just really paying attention to those thoughts that come up and working through that, like taking a moment, like write it down. Like that is my shit. Writing things down, working through it, writing down those thoughts that come up when you feel guilty, and asking like, oh, why am I feeling guilty about this? And really going back and thinking about different situations that you've come across in your life experience that are maybe similar. I know, for example, like I never used to take a vacation. So I know it doesn't seem like that now for those of you who follow me. I live in vacation. No, but when I was in high school all the way till college, I didn't really take vacations. Like I was just like working. I was working 3 jobs at once and going to school. I don't know how I did that, but I did. And I would just work, and like I felt liberated working, but I was tired all the time. And when I started to take vacations, it felt weird for me. I was like, oh, like I feel like I'm being unproductive, and I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that. And I even catch myself in that when I'm on vacation now, like, oh, I should be like recording a video, or like I should be doing something for my business. And yeah, like there's a time and place for that, but there's definitely time and place for rest, right? And where that stemmed from was like I wasn't taught growing up that vacations were necessary, or that like taking time for yourself was necessary. I always saw my parents just working all the time, and like, yeah, like we take road trips sometimes, but the act of actually taking care of yourself and taking breaks, it wasn't encouraged, right? And that's no fault of anybody. Like this is, again, like these are transgenerational things that show up. And it's only until, you start to become conscious and aware of those things, that's when things start to change, and you start to notice things happening in your body, and you start to notice happening things in your wellness. And, I'll go ahead and share another example. I remember I was working for the Ontario government, and I was just like, that was my dream job. Don't know why, but that was my dream job. And I got to a point where it was so stressful. I was sick all the time. My adrenals were just like, they just were non-existent. I was sick all the time, stressed out, sad, depressed, couldn't get out of bed, called in to work sick a lot, because I was just not okay mentally. And I had gone to my doctor, and I had told her, it's my chair. I had gone to my doctor and told her what was happening, like, things that were happening in my personal life, things happening at work. And she's like, yeah, like, you need a break. Like, you need to take a break. Like, she told me, she's like, you're not going back to work. I'm writing you a note. She gave me a month off. She said, take this to your work. Let them know you're taking a leave. And it was so foreign to me to do that, because I wasn't taught to, like, even if you're sick, like, you go to work, or if you're, And so I remember that feeling leaving the doctor's office that day, and I'm like, oh, I get a month off, and I'm like, oh, but I'm not like physically disabled or anything, so like this doesn't feel right. Um, and then like I had talked to my therapist at the time about it, and she agreed that I needed that time off. But there was that guilt of, oh my gosh, like what's work gonna think? And I'm actually okay. I'm moving, I'm walking. Like we often associate like physical wellness like with like functioning. Like you can be functioning, but you cannot be well. Two totally different things. But we can mix those things up and cause ourselves to feel guilty about these things because we're like, oh, well, like I'm functioning, like I'm not, you know, um, I'm not broken. So anyway, I ended up taking that month off, and I remember just like feeling ashamed to tell people about it because I was like, oh, like it's gonna look like I'm weak, and um, it's just gonna look so bad on me, and I'm gonna get fired from my job, which like they can't do, obviously. Like doctor wrote them a note, and yeah, and so anyway, that's when I started to realize that I need to take breaks from work, and that I need to take care of myself. And again, like that guilt showed up so deeply for me because I felt like I was disappointing my parents. I felt like I was disappointing myself, like, oh, like you're not strong enough to be in this career. Um, and like that just really, those were just not those were just not the truth. Those things that I was thinking to myself were not the truth, right? And so that is when I learned to start taking care of myself by taking those breaks. And yeah, anyway, so working through guilt can be triggering. It can be triggering because the guilt is not you, it's what's been programmed into you, right? Like if you had a free choice and like everybody, for example, like if you had a free choice and no matter what choice you made, everybody would support you, like would guilt exist then? No, right? So it all comes down to how we reframe our guilt, how we reframe the image of ourselves around wanting more for ourselves without feeling that tug of like, oh, you shouldn't do this, right? Like, and ask yourself, like, is what you're doing wrong? Like, are you hurting anybody physically? We might hurt people sometimes emotionally when we do what's best for us. But really just asking yourself, like, what is wrong with what I'm doing? How can I work through this guilt and honor what I need? Because what you need is so important. And when you start to really dissect the subject of guilt and see and be aware of how it shows up in your life, you're gonna start to see that it probably shows up in all aspects of your life. But you're gonna start to see that it is connected to that people pleasing trait that you've maybe undertaken from your childhood. And so how we can work through guilt is just by being honest with ourselves and with others, saying exactly what it is that you need from yourself, or maybe that you need from another person. Okay, being transparent, being truthful, okay? And really just taking away, and this is easier said than done, but really just taking away that responsibility of, I have to make this other person feel better, or I have to sacrifice my needs in order to be loved or to be validated. And so the people that understand where you're coming from, and the people who are going to respect you when you set those boundaries, you're not going to feel that guilt, right? And so, like I said, being honest, being transparent, and then really aligning your decisions with your soul. Okay, because we are so programmed, especially in this society right now, to follow the norm, follow that 9 to 5, follow that, get a job with the government like I did. Don't do it. I'm just joking. That might be something that you like, so do it if you need to. But yeah, we've been programmed to live this specific lifestyle that's been promoted, and that's been promoted in our school systems, that's been promoted in our family. And honestly, that lifestyle is just, for me at least, it's not something that our souls are aligned with. I talk to my family all the time, and I hear work, and even me sometimes I'm work, and really we really need to be aligning our decisions, whether it's our job, whether it's our relationships, whether it's what it has to do with our own life, and aligning it with our soul's purpose, and aligning it with what feels right for us. And that's going to look different for everybody. It's going to look so different for everybody, and we just have to have that respect, and really shy away from making people feel guilty about the decisions that they're making. It's all and I'm not sure why we do this to people. I know that I've been guilty of this in the past, where we try to make people feel guilty for the decisions that they make, when it has nothing to do with us too. And really just giving people the agency and the autonomy to make those life decisions for themselves. Give people, provide people with that safe space, so that they don't feel like crap coming to you saying hey, I'm gonna do this. You don't have to agree with everything that someone does. You don't have to agree with everything that, with the lifestyle that somebody lives. It's gonna look different for everybody, and that's really okay. It really is. But to provide that safe space for that, and let people make their decisions on their own. What if we just did that for people? What if people just came to, unless someone's saying hey, I'm gonna go and hurt somebody, that's obviously different, where you might have to voice your opinion there. But if someone's hey, I want to quit my job and start my own business, and because we are so fear instilled by society, and that may scare us for that person, because we want that person to be okay, but really just supporting them and saying wow, good for you, that's so brave. And then imagine that response, instead of, oh, who do you think you are? I know I've had people said to me you can't quit your 9 to 5. What do you mean? That's your job. And like, yeah, like it's my job, yeah, but at the same time, people grow their businesses every single day. Like, that would be my job too, right? Except I'd just be working for myself, right? And so if you gave people that space to come to you and say, hey, I'm doing this, and just giving them your support instead of that, like instilling doubt into them. Because from that, like, that's when people start to feel guilty about decisions that they make, based on what other people have said to them when they've wanted to share something that's so exciting for them, right? So just don't be that person. Just be the person who says, hey, like, that's amazing, and like, I'm here for you throughout the journey. Like, let me know how I can support you. And so, that's sort of like what you can do on the other end if you're the person who's feeling that guilt, that really doing work to trust in your intuition, really doing work to trust in your heart. Like, I said this already, but asking yourself, like, where is that guilt rooted from? Is it rooted from your childhood? Is it rooted from a relationship? Is it rooted from something that someone said to you? And write that down. Okay, and then ask yourself, like, why is it following me? Why is it following me? And like, because guilt can like have us in these like weird ass spaces where it leaves us like a little bit irrational, and we're like, okay, like, I'm feeling so guilty that I'm just gonna try and bring myself back to safety by doing something that I know is not going to serve me, but it's going to maybe serve the other person or the situation in general, but it's not going to serve me, right? So just like really, 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 really coming back to yourself and asking, like, where is that guilt coming from? Yes. And knowing that guilt is not something that is just gonna go away. It's this is something that we have to maintain. Like, we're human beings. These feelings are going to surface sometimes, and if you're a person that feels overly guilty, again, just coming back to your heart and really just asking yourself, like, what it is that you want, and just executing that, because at the end of the day, like, you came here to live your life for you, and other people are always going to have opinions of what you do and how you live your life. And to be honest with you, the people who have comments on that, like, that's a reflection of them and what's happening for them inside. If people are trying to talk self-doubt into you, like, know that that's their fear speaking, not yours, right? Okay, I'm going to end here, and I just wanted to thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe if this video resonated with you. Also, follow me on Instagram at safehavensanctuary_. And yeah, thank you so much. Please feel free to send me a message. I also offer free 30-minute discovery calls if you feel called to work with me. I promise you that you will leave my sessions uplifted. You will leave them with clarity of the mind. You will leave them feeling validated, and you'll, like, I'm telling you, my sessions are, you're gonna transform. I'll just leave it at that. So thank you again, and have a beautiful rest of your day from my heart to yours. Bye.